Hello, everybody, and welcome to Be Fearless, the weekly live podcast. And today we have another special guest talking to us about how we can become more fearless in our lives. So we're going to talk to our lovely guest today. Our guest is Jeff Mckoy. Good morning, Jeff, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world.
I'll say good day and thank you so much for inviting me on.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you today. I'm really excited about our conversation because we're going to be digging deep into some stories and some strategies that you've used to help you to be more fearless in your life, and some advice that you could give to our listeners. So without further ado, I'm just going to say I'm the host today for this G.S.T podcast, Global Speakers Talk podcast. And I'm a primary school teacher. I'm Lisa Marie, and I now help parents to teach their children at home and support their children at home with their learning. So I want to find out more about you. So I'm going to tell the audience a little bit about you, Jeff. Jeff is a loving single parent of two nearly grown boys. He has been a professional level pianist for many, many years. He's the son of a pastor and a worship leader at his church. He's an Amazon #1 best-selling author in 8 categories, a serial entrepreneur, business mentor, and marketing expert. And also, he does a very special thing because he helps coaches to make more money, less time and effort. Can you tell us some more about that, please, Jeff, before we dive into the fearless?
Certainly. Basically, what I do is I help faith-led entrepreneurs in particular. Um, I believe that we spend a lot of time putting our feet on the brakes and whatnot. And the thing is when we're relying solely upon our physical efforts and activities, it makes things so much more difficult. It's like we're trying to hit the gas and put it to the floor, put the pedal to the metal, as they say, and we never take the time to realize that we're on our brake. We have our foot on the brake at the same time. And so it makes everything so much harder, so much more difficult, requiring so much more energy than what's necessary to move forward. And so I kind of help the entrepreneurs that I work with, as I am working with them in the online and marketing space, to connect that side of their spirituality, regardless of what their specific faith is or religious beliefs, or even if they don't, subscribe. But if they have the capacity to believe that there is something greater than just the physical self of them that they touch and feel, then they can tap into a limitless resource that can actually make every effort that they're endeavoring in go by much more smoothly. So I help them kind of bridge the gap between that and move their business forward faster, easier, with less stress and struggle as a result.
That sounds fabulous. And I'm sure there's going to be people that would like to get in touch with you. So I'll make sure your contact details are in the comments so that people can indeed touch base with you after this. So we're going to dive straight in then, Jeff, and I'm going to ask you your first question about being fearless. Now, can you tell us about a time or some situation in your life when you experienced fear, which may or may not have stopped you and prevented you from doing something you wanted to do or something you knew you should do?
Um, there have been a number of different times that I've come into that have stopped me or prevented me in times past. But when I think about it specifically, like especially when I started getting into the online space and starting to learn how to, just kind of get my message out there and talk to people, one of the biggest things that I ran into was a fear of judgment, and that was like a giant that had to be crossed because of my background and in my own religious beliefs, if you will. That it's like my father being a third generation pastor, it's like we were always attentive to how we perceived from people on watching, audiences and congregations and so forth. So the image that we portrayed and carried ourselves was always an incredible struggle, as far as walking on eggshells, as they call it here. We have to tread lightly because we don't want to be perceived as being wrong. And being a PK, which is acronym for preacher's kid, as they call it here, we're looked at a whole lot more closely than other kids or other people just being themselves, So it's like they expect a certain level of excellence or perfection at all times, and that kind of breeds a internal drive to want to be more perfect, because we buy into those unrealistic expectations that other people put on us. It's like, first, we're human beings. We're all human beings, and we're going to make mistakes. We're going to have errors. And the thing is that when we make them, they don't necessarily have to be the end of the world. And so it made it difficult when I first started to put myself out into the online marketing space, simply because, I was afraid of what people would have to say. Would people like me? Would they agree with what I was saying? Would they not agree? Would it influence anyone? Would anyone want to hear? There's so many things that were running amok, if you will. And I was putting a lot of my energy into the outside external circumstances, as opposed to trusting the process and moving forward from an internal perspective. And when I changed my focus from the external to the internal, and not only just to the internal, but also not relying so heavily upon myself and my physical capabilities, but trusting that there's a higher power beyond beyond what I can physically do that can kind of guide me into a greater level of success. Then it's like when I started focusing on the love I had for myself, it was able to cast out that fear, if you will. And
Mm.
that was a very empowering position, and also relying upon God. I don't have no problem with saying God, because that's who I subscribe to. But
Sure.
the point of the matter is that releasing my external focus and placing that focus back on who I believe is my source, that changed the perspective and the paradigm that I had, and allowed me to just do things that I previously thought were not even possible. And I was able to show up greatly and just be present and just be myself and relax, because I went from being extremely shy, even when I graduated high school, not being able to look people in the face at times, as a young adult, being able to have that paradigm shift that changed my belief systems about myself. And a lot of that internal looking in is changing who you are at the core, as far as how you perceive yourself, because as within, so without, and how you are feeling is directly related to how you show up, because it's going to directly impact the thoughts that you form around yourself and around your state of being. And as you are able to shift those thoughts and take control of how you are processing them, then it allows you to show up differently, and allowed me to show up differently and be more genuine in myself, and to do the things that I did not have the courage to do before.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's going to really resonate with a lot of people, because it is difficult when you first go out into that online space. And I'm sure that some people are still grappling with those fears. And we also know that it doesn't happen overnight, does it? So I'm sure that you had a process with that. Once you decided to make this paradigm shift, you have to work on it. So can you tell us a bit more about that some of the actions that you took to um, go inside yourself and keep moving forward with your fearlessness, if you like, and the bravery and the courage to do it, because this isn't something that just happens overnight. It takes time. So if you can share a little bit about some of the ways that you use to overcome your fears.
Okay, certainly. One of the things is, I was speaking just a moment ago about the my belief systems and the things internally going within. A lot of times when we're focused so much on the outside, and we start thinking, it's like when we see a problem, we see a challenge, or we see something that we want to face, we need to face, but don't necessarily feel the courage to face.
Sure.
We start thinking, well, what can we do to kind of get that done, but still, skate around the problem, skate around the thing that we don't want to face head on. And it's like, what can I do? And the thing is, when you are operating at an environment level, you're looking at those things that are outside and saying, how will they affect me? How will they impact me? How will they make things more difficult for me as I'm purging forging my way forward rather. And when you're looking at the environment, it's kind of like when a flower, when you have a flower and the flower doesn't bloom, you don't blame the flower. You blame the environment, because the environment will determine whether or not that flower has what it needs in order to flourish and to grow. And us as individuals, we're somewhat of a flower, and that environment is that the flower of our belief system has to grow in is that environment of our mind and our thoughts and the way that we process things. So a lot of times we would jump out there and we start trying to take action from a unempowered place, and that's where we're met with so much fear, because there's this confidence competence loop, and it's like the less confidence or competence we have, the lower our confidence level and the greater the fear. And there's a level of competence that's going to increase as you do it more, and the confidence is going to increase simultaneously as you do it more. But a lot of times when you're jumping out there at first and you're doing things, you start looking at the fears that you have, and it's like you just try to do it, and it's like, oh, it may not work, or it's not going to work. But then that's on the behavioral level. It's like we're looking at what can we do on a behavioral level, but up and beyond that, we have to look at our competence and our capacity to actually do it. You can't expect necessarily to be doing something like a 20-year veteran, when you're in your second week. It just doesn't work that way. There's a process that you have to go through, and part of that process, especially in the early stages when you want to start making those quantum leaps and those major jumps forward, is moving beyond the capacity and compensity and moving to the level of the belief system, where the thoughts that you're having support the actions that you want to take. And the best way to do that, and what I've had to do that, is to go even beyond that, to the identity level, to look at who I was being and how I was showing up. And when I change who I'm being in the process, it kind of trickles on down. It's like the higher up the ladder you go, once you step into the role of who you should be, as far as looking at a greater version of yourself, you're able to move forward faster. But you have to be able to identify, well, what would the best version of me be like? How would I show up? How would I operate? And because you don't necessarily jump into that with perfection initially, you start making those little iterations of progress moving you forward. And as a result, as you have identified that identity of how you want to present and how you want to show up and how you're able to walk in, that identity level will trickle down, and it will go into your belief systems. You start looking at, okay, well, instead of me saying I can't do this anymore, now I can look at, okay, how can I do this in spite of that thing? Or how can I overcome it, as opposed to I can't do it because of, is how can I do it in spite of? It's a shift that comes down from that identity level. And from there, if you may be looking and saying, hey, look, I don't have the skill sets or the resources, then you start, okay, well, let me look, but say, because I'm trying to see how I can. I'm not going to say I can't do it because I don't have those skill sets or I don't have those resources. I start to develop those skills, and I start to look for sources and places I can research and study, or if I can cut some spending or whatever the case may be, to gather more resources to support the new identity that I'm striving towards. And once I do that, then when I take action on a behavioral level, then the actions that I take will be more productive, because I will have those things that I was missing before when I said I can't do it. Because when that can't do it attitude cuts down a lot of options and closes a lot of roads that you could travel down if you had the confidence. And if your belief system isn't there supporting you, you will create walls where there really are no walls, but what you're willing to step into, because you're limiting yourself. So all that coming back down from the identity down to the belief system, down to your capacity and compensity, down to your behavioral, and then that comes down. And once you get all those things in line, then you are able to shift your environment and change your situation. And before long, you start realizing, hey, that I am showing up. I am making some progress. I'm getting some things done.
That's it. Exactly. I mean, it sort of starts with your feelings, doesn't it? Like you said, what I'm hearing you say is that whole paradigm shift had to happen in what you were thinking and feeling in order to change your behaviors, and that was the key, really, and to keep that at the forefront until the behaviors became almost like a pattern that you could keep growing on, and every time you did something you got a bit better and everything. Yeah, it's
Yes.
certainly a journey, isn't it? But absolutely, it's about confidence and growing through that, isn't it? And understanding that you can do things that you might have thought you couldn't. And when you've got that big background of having the feeling that you had about needing to be perfection initially,
Mm.
that's an
Yeah.
extra burden when it comes to bringing forth that fearlessness
Yeah.
to have the confidence to change your feelings about things and just say, well, I can behave a certain way and I can do this, and it's all going to be okay. Thank you for sharing that. That's
Well,
wonderful.
if I could
um
add to that real quickly, I would just say even with the habits that we have, a lot of times people we have the aspirations that we're reaching towards or we're moving forward towards, and we don't rise necessarily to the level of our aspirations. We
mm,
fall to the levels of our habits and systems.
mm,
And so it's like, yes, we might be reaching towards the sky, but at the end of the day, we don't float on the ceiling. We stand on the floor, and your floor is going to be your habits and systems. And so when you
mm.
start looking at those things closely and making sure that the habits and systems support the aspirations, then you have the foundation that you need in order to reach that height of the ceiling.
What you're really saying is yeah, getting out of your comfort zone, isn't it? So if you get into a comfort zone where you're in the habits, then step out of it again and and keep going. Just always be that little bit out of the shadow of your
Yes.
comfort zone and keep striving. Wonderful. So is do you have any things now, any current fears that you're working on overcoming at all? Is there anything that you can think of that you're still, working on the thought process to change the behavior?
Um, well, one thing about fears, a lot of times, when different ones are working through them, a lot of times we want to keep our fears private.
This is
um,
true. And we
it's
all
not,
have them and they're quite normal. But yeah,
yeah.
it's how we deal with them that's important, isn't it? So yeah.
Yeah, inside the church system where I grew up, they say a new level, new devil.
Yeah.
So so it doesn't really matter, what level you're at, because there is a fear to be faced at any level.
Mm,
um, and once as far as myself, even as I expand, it's like you look at different things. The biggest fear that I've had, is when I'm expanding to different parts and different aspects of my business, and I struggle to let go of the control of that, because it's
mm,
like when we are holding something, I says like, if I'm doing it, I know exactly how it's being done and how it's going to take place, but
yeah.
I gotta let somebody else control, let go of something, let someone else control, and if they take
Mm,
over it, what if they don't meet my standards, and what if it doesn't come across the way I want it to come across because they're not me, so they don't think and operate and move like I would. And so as a
yeah.
result, it becomes a struggle to let go of some of the things that you feel like are critical. It becomes difficult to let go of those times when you might be writing content or to support your
Mm,
ideas, or if you've been editing your own stuff and whatnot, it gets difficult to let somebody else do it because, hey, look, I would have done that. The perfectionist in me would not have let that thing right there go, but
yeah.
like they let it slide. It's like, so you wrestle with
Yeah.
those things.
I
And
can imagine again a lot of people completely resonating with that, because let's face it, we all experience fear as a normal reaction. It just makes me think of fairground rides, like you're just out of control on fairground rides, aren't you? Someone else is controlling it. You have nothing over what happens, and so in comes a little bit of fear sometimes when you don't know what to expect, etc. So yeah, I definitely think that we can all agree with you there that it can be uncomfortable, but it's part of life's challenges, and it's good to become more fearless and face them. Yeah, sure.
even inside of that, if I could add, when you start looking at when you're letting these things go, and the thing is, when when entrepreneurs in the online space, especially when they're first starting out and they're working by themselves, it's like they want to do everything, and it's so fearful to let go. It's like, you know, I I'm not going to do pay anybody to do that. I'm going to do this myself.
mm,
And the thing is, this is the type of business that if you really want to get to that next level, that it goes through phases, and part of those phases, is it's going to be the letting go, because if you don't, then you're going to be looking at working 10, 12, 14-hour days if you think you're going to build anything great, and you're going
mm,
to do it all by yourself, and you don't ever look at the capacity of having any help or any outside help, because you're operating from the scope of an employee instead of a
mm,
entrepreneur and a visionary, and
mm,
that's what you really would have to do in that sense, is grabbing a team around you, no matter what you're doing, to support the vision. And if the vision is something that you can completely achieve on your own, is it really a worthwhile vision? Is it really the best that you're capable of presenting? You should have something that's greater than yourself, that pushes you beyond your limits. That, hey, that and to where your vision is so great that
mm,
others want to set their vision aside and support yours, because it's like,
mm.
yeah, I want to be a part of that. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Delegate to build your empire. I mean, that's what you got to do, haven't you? You've got to let it go.
Yes.
So, how would you describe to our audience what the transformation was like once you started to become more fearless in your life and be able to shift the paradigm?
Well, one thing, is ironic, because most people are out there, they are looking to, it's like, okay, what do I do? They want a step-by-step system, and they, just show me the steps, and that's fine. Well, there's nothing wrong with having steps, and the process is good, and you should have them. However, people are out there looking for the magic pill. What's that
Mm,
one thing that's going to just make everything so easy, and just make it flow, and make everything snap in place and come together? What is
mm,
that one thing? And when we're in that place and we're looking for that one thing, if how to was sufficient in and of itself, then
mm,
everyone would be successful. I mean, YouTube is the how-to hub of the world. It's like how to do this, how to do that, how to do the other. It's like you learn how to do. I don't know, if you search hard enough, you might find somebody teach you how to have a baby. I don't know, but but the thing is that, if how to was enough all by itself, then there would be more people that would be achieving the success they want, and not
mm,
struggling so much as they face their fears. And
mm,
the thing is when you've done so many things, and you tried so long and so hard, and it's been such a grind, you have to eventually come to the realization that how to in and of itself isn't enough. But yet, those who haven't had that revelation yet, they're looking for the how to, and the transformation starts to take place. Which is why I focus on connecting the spirituality as a part of the process of working with my own clients and students, is simply because I know that once they start to understand how that works and start to weave that into what they're doing,
mm,
as opposed to trying to keep that separate. It's like, okay, my spirituality is over here. Now, myself with a church background, a Christian background, and so forth, it's like I always had, separation of, like, church and state, as we say here in the U.S. So I had a separation of spirituality and business, and it's like we wanted to compartmentalize it and say, okay, it just operates in this little small slither of space right here, and
mm,
then we think it has to remain blocked off from everything else. But when I started opening myself up and bringing that over into what I was actually doing,
mm,
um, then it shifted me from a being state and a being level, and as a result, things started running a whole lot smoother. So that transition, it allowed me to stop being so how to centered and focus on
mm,
what's that magic pill that someone else out there can give me. And I see all these shiny objects and saying, that's it, no, that's it. And we jump from one thing to the next, trying to find the magic, if you will, that's going to make things
mm,
work. And instead, once we have shifted who we are from our state of being and our identity level, then we are able to go within and find more answers. We intuitively start to know more things, especially when we are trusting and leaning towards our higher power, or as I lean more into God.
mm,
He will advise me, because if I'm looking at my finite ability as a person, I only have the only knowledge I have accessible to me is the past experiences that I've had, as well as the limited scope of what I may currently know at any given moment. And if
Mm,
I do that, it's finite. But when I can tap into a higher power, and I can tap into the higher power, the source, the universe, as some may call or what have you, or the higher self, when I can tap into that, there's access to an infinite amount of knowledge and insight that is not presently available to our logical processes and capacity. And when you're
mm,
able to tap into that, you begin to see things from a different perspective, and you begin to intuitively know what the next step is, and what to do afterwards. I mean, having mentorship and coaching and things of that nature is so important
mm,
because it helps you make that bridge, and people tend to stand away from that stuff. It's like, oh, I'll figure it out. The truth of the matter is, you're not gonna, if you could have figured it out, you already would have.
mm,
It's like, it's so long you've been working on it. And even people who go in online space with business, they say, well, hey, I'm going to go online, and in next 6 months, I'm going to make the kind of money that a doctor makes here in the US. And they went to school for 12 years after high school, to learn to make that kind of money. It just doesn't work that
mm.
way.
No.
You cannot get all of the answers solely from yourself. You have to go, you have to have mentorship, you have to have coaching, you have to have access to new paradigms. That's why even myself, in addition to having my own mentor, that I subscribe to, every year I'm always subscribing into more education, but I'm reading 2 to 3 books a week. And in the process of reading, it's like, if you're not reading to learn more about your craft and what you're doing, it's like, if you don't read, you live one lifetime. But if you read, you can live 1,000, and you can learn from all of them,
Mm,
and you can incorporate those things into what you're doing. So, the biggest answer to put it to a specific finite response is the biggest thing that took place in the transformation was the belief system and understanding who I was as an individual, and how powerful I can be once I make the decision, or the commitment to being the better
mm,
version of myself, and the lack of needing to rely so heavily on outside sources. But initially, you're going to have to get, until you get that foundation. If you're in a struggling state, you have to have those coaches and mentors, and those
mm,
are ongoing. You got to have those in place to help you
mm.
bridge, because there are going to be things you don't know that you don't know, and as a
Yeah,
result,
exactly.
you
I
can't.
mean, coaches and mentors need their own coaches and mentors, because if they could do it themselves, then you know that would be different.
Absolutely.
But no, we all know that that's not possible. And when you were talking, it made me actually think about takes a village to raise a child. And I was actually thinking, well, it's kind of similar. It's like it takes a network really to bring an entrepreneur or CEO into their best place, as well as you're working on your own. You've got to have people around you helping. So finally, the last question, I love this one because it's always very interesting. If you had somebody come to you and say, I'm really struggling, I'm too fearful, and I can't do this thing, I can't move forward with this thing, I can't follow my dreams, I'm stuck, and I'm allowing the fear to prevent me. So what would you say to someone who is letting that fear stop them from perhaps, following their dreams and doing something they've always wanted to do?
Well, one of the things I would say, you know, is your why, your reason, and if you're just doing something to, for the sake of money, um, that may take you so far, but there gets to be a point to where once money isn't the challenge, or isn't the struggle, the focus shifts from there, because the money doesn't provide the fulfillment that you always thought it was once you got to that place.
Mm,
Um, and the thing is, you have to have a why that empowers you. There's a story that I hear often. I've heard. I can say often, but um, and it kind of talks about, there's a man that's walking down the road, and he sees, he hears a dog whimpering, and like it is in pain, and he goes down that road, and it's like he follows the sound, and he goes over and he sees this gentleman on the porch in a rocking chair, and the dog is beside him just on the porch whimpering, and like, hey, you know, what's going on? You know, your dog seems to be in pain. What's wrong? And the old man said, oh, he's sitting on a nail. Sitting on a nail? Why doesn't he move? And
Mm,
he says, because it hurts too much. He's not comfortable where he's at, but it hurts too much. The process of changing his situation is too painful. And so
yeah.
I mentioned that because it's that why that that makes you make the decision to move forward. And if you're not
Mm,
uncomfortable enough, you can't go in and build anything great if you don't have a dire, a hard, and strong set commitment. A lot of people says, well, I'll do this if the creek don't rise. If the water don't get too high, the tide don't get too high, then I'll keep moving forward. And what they're basically saying, as long as I don't run into any struggles or challenges, then I'll keep moving forward towards it. And if you're building anything that's worthwhile, you're going to run into challenges. You're going to run into struggles here and there. However, the difference is going to be between making a choice and making a decision. A choice, you may choose this path or the other path, and that's going to be based upon external circumstances and conditions around
mm,
you. But a
mm,
decision is an internal commitment. A choice is an external commitment that can be changed to a different choice. But a
mhm,
decision is an internal commitment, whereas you make that decision, it's like you divide it in that decision. So that means all of your options, all of your choices, external choices, they're cut off because you're saying, this is the path I'm going to follow. This is what I'm committed to. And so there is no, I'm kind of committed, no more than a woman is
mm,
saying, I'm kind of pregnant, kind of not. You're either
mm,
that or you're not.
yeah.
And so you have to make that, once you're able to make that commitment internally, that come no matter what, I'm going to keep forging forward. I understand that it's a process, and I shouldn't look at failure or struggles as the end all, and
Mm,
don't personalize those struggles. Or if something doesn't go the way that you want it to go, don't make that mean something about who you are as a person.
no.
You may have had an event that failed, or you may have had something that didn't work out, but that's not who you are. That was just a event in time
Yeah.
that happened, and and only time it really gets to really be bad is when you don't use failure as a tool as it's intended, which is to tap into the lessons that are inside it, because you can
Mm,
actually extract. It's only failure if you have all the information and all of the ability and the capacity to do it, and you know
mhm,
everything there is to succeed, and then you just arbitrarily chose to do it a different way, and then you fail.
mhm,
That's failure. Or if you decide you're going to quit, that's failure. You never go back to it. But outside of that, there is no failure. Failure is a tool to help correct direction, like a GPS to hone you in on the thing. So it says, oh, okay, you're headed this way. It's just like a plane is taking off going over long distance. We heard about it as kids, maybe. If they're 1 degree off from where they're going, they could end up in another country. By the time they
mm,
get to the intended destination, they end up being in a different country. But it's a matter of slight little bit iterations along the way that
mhm,
redirect
mhm,
the path and the ebb and flow back into the centering. So you're going to miss the mark from time to time. You're going to weave in and out of that mark. But as
mm,
you continue to recorrect, as those failure boundaries or those challenge boundaries or those struggle boundaries but you see those things and you say, oh, I can't go this way. Oh, I'm going too far to the right. And you weave and you continue to center
yeah.
back towards your focus, and you can use those things to guide you. So I would tell them to stay committed. Once they make a commitment, have their commitment made from a internal decision. And if it's a committed decision, it's on a scale of 1 to 10. There is no 7, there is no 8. You're either committed or you're not. It's a yes or
Yeah.
no, and you go forward. So make that commitment. Stay focused on where you're headed to. Understand that it's not going to be a smooth or straight line. There is no
Yeah.
straight line. It never goes perfectly the way you want it to all the time. Even had a little challenge this morning when I was trying to get on this podcast. But the thing is, it never goes straight. And when you understand, hey, little hiccups happen here and there, but they're not the
Mhm,
end, and they don't mean anything about you. And you can eat the meat and spit out the bones, as I like to say. There's some
Oh
good
yeah,
there.
that's good. Yeah. And as you face those curves, you can learn from them. And that's it. Always take the positive slant on it. And like you say, it doesn't define you. Your mistakes don't define you. It's been wonderful talking with you today. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and it
Yes.
is time for us to say goodbye to the audience. I'm very grateful that you came in today. And like I mentioned before, we're going to have all your contact details in the comments thread, so people can
Yes. Yeah, I'll
indeed
get those
get
in
in
there.
touch with you if they would like to. So thank you for coming today. And to our audience, I'd love you to join us again next week when we do another episode of Be Fearless with another special guest, where we can find out some insights into how you can live your life with less fear and to be more brave when you face situations. So thank you for listening today. And if you are watching the replay, please put #replay to let us know that you were here. And grateful to you, Jeff, and I hope you have enjoy the best of the rest of your day, because it's early there. And good afternoon, good evening, goodbye to everybody else. All right, thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.